You ready? Okay. Meeting's called to order. Let's pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Noted, Byron?
Rolled noted.
Okay, we open public comment for anything that's not in the agenda. Anybody feels free to speak. You are allowed 3 minutes. Something that's not in the agenda, anybody?
Wait until we discuss that, if that's,
But I thought the agenda was for the amendment to the general plan, or is it? Yeah, so I was going to talk about the general plans generally, not about the amendment, which is 9 dash something or other. If you look at the agenda, that's what I saw online. Well, I mean, can you clarify, isn't it on the amendment 9 dash, I can't remember, it was 42?
which amends the general plan in its entirety.
Okay.
So if you're here to speak for the general plan.
I was going to talk about the new communities portion, is that?
That is definitely on the next
Oh.
agendized item.
Okay, so that is in the amendment. I wasn't sure if that was in. Okay, well, I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have anything to say? Something that's not in the agenda?
It is kind of on the agenda, but I just wanted to thank you, whoever we did this to, for giving back 61,000 head of cattle to the cattlemen of San Benito County in 2035. That's all I wanted to say. They had it down to 6,988, and now we got 68,324. I don't know what they did with all the greenhouse gas that they eliminated all the cattle last time, but they did a hell of a job on it. Thanks.
Okay.
They never look a gift horse.
All right, public comment closed. Consent agenda. Anybody have any questions, commissioners? Nope. Nope.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, now we go to the regular meeting. That was for the lot line adjustment. Anybody here to speak on that?
So this item is a request by an applicant requesting to appeal a lot line adjustment from, that was previously approved several years ago. And I believe the people who are requesting the appeal are here to speak on it.
Okay, they can step up and speak.
Thank you very much, Commissioners, for your time and for this opportunity. My name is Donna Bakich. I'm the attorney for Ms. Lovelace, the party requesting an appeal of not only the lot line adjustment that has been identified as 06047, but also the approval of the Associated Certificate of Compliance 07-69, as well as the approval and recording of 2 survey maps, one in 2007 and one in 2012. That were submitted by H.D. Peters and Company with regards to the subject properties. Just a matter of clarification. I'm going to try and make this quick because I know you have lots of comments for the next agenda item. I'd like to clarify, I was provided with a copy of Barbara Thompson, Deputy County Counsel's letter recommending that you guys reject this appeal or these appeals. I'd like to clarify a few things and explain why I believe that the rejection of these appeals is erroneous. First of all, County Council's recommendation is not based on any cited law, statute, ordinance, rule, policy, or regulation. It is merely an equitable argument of timeliness. However, it was the fact that my client only found out about the movement, a very serious movement of a property line that's been in place for over 100 years, was found out in 2014 when she found her neighbor on her property. She was very quick to report her findings to the county in an attempt to seek help with the planning department. She spoke with a number of county employees, including Ken Lewis, Armand, Byron, and Barbara herself, in an attempt to remedy this situation and figure out how best to resolve it amicably, perhaps between the parties. It was essentially the county's response and current response that nothing will be done or shall be done unless a lawsuit is filed. And I want to make it clear my client is not a litigious plaintiff. She does not want to simply go straight to court. She also doesn't want to take up your time, the county supervisor's time, or a court's time on something that we feel the county has an affirmative obligation to at the very least look into. These appeals should not be rejected for her attempts to work with the county that's been going on for over a year now. To be clear, the basis of our appeal is not essentially the lot line adjustment, but that portion of the lot line adjustment, the survey maps, and the certificate of compliance, which officially, as a matter of record, took away 3+ acres of her property. Like I said, this property in its entirety has been a part of the Lovelace family for generations. And we do have many witnesses who acknowledge the property line where my client feels, and where many recorded surveys going back the last 100 years in the county's archives show the property line to be. These all result in substantial damages to my client. I believe the county has an affirmative obligation to look into this, specifically why my client, a neighboring property owner within 300 feet of the lot line being adjusted, was not sent statutorily required notice of the pending lot line approval. Also, whether the applicant, H.D. Peters, submitted false, misleading, or fraudulent information to the county on which it based its application, its administrative approvals, and allowed the recordation of the survey maps. Why the application review procedures allowed such a big discrepancy in property lines and an oversight such as her not being notified as according to regulation to occur within this process. So far, the county's representations to my client fall along the lines of, we won't act unless we're being sued. To me, this is a completely inappropriate response for a county agency. Isn't the county's application procedure supposed to ensure that contemplated actions involving land do not detrimentally affect the property of others? In this instance, that is exactly what's happened. Even worse, she's had to take it upon herself to look into the matter and to gather all of the facts and all of the evidence that she needs to proceed. I would strongly encourage you at the very least to continue this matter and give the planning department an opportunity to make a presentation as to their findings, or at least to order some sort of investigation to look into all the records that are currently in the county archives, which prove my client's point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Anybody else want to speak on this matter?
So your options here are to reject or choose to not hear the appeal. You can also direct staff to put the appeal on the agenda, or you can continue it as it is right now until the next meeting, which is 2 weeks from now, and we can continue to research it, and then we'll have Barbara Thompson here as well.
Through the chair, what do you mean as it is right now? You would have it scheduled for continuance already?
Well, no, we don't have it considered for, staff's recommendation is to not agendize the appeal, to not hear it. And that decision is also appealable to the Board of Supervisors. So if the applicant wished to appeal it to the board, they could. But if this commission wanted to schedule an appeal, I would actually recommend that you continue this item to the next meeting, and we can discuss it further with Barbara Thompson, who is familiar with the case.
Pierce, any questions? You're looking at me like, oh. Dan, you
No
have questions?
questions, but I got a motion when we get ready.
Well, if there's going to be a continuance, then I can just talk with county council about it, because it's, maybe the nice thing about this is this is purely legal as far as the timeliness issue, the statute of limitations issue. And so that's primarily what I'm interested in. But just by way of background, so this lot line adjustment came into the planning department and was handled administratively.
I believe it went to the Planning Commission in, I want to say 2007 or 2008. Thanks.
I believe if anything went in front of the Planning Commission, it would have been the certificate of compliance, but I'm not sure, and I'm not convinced that anything went before the Planning Commission. I do believe it was an administrative over-the-counter approval. Just so you know, in my research, I've discovered that the Subdivision Map Act does not apply. It expressly accepts lot line adjustment approvals or applications from the 90-day requirement for appeal.
Well, there's a
It's-
10-day appeal requirement
it's
in our
10
county
days.
code.
Yeah.
Right, but is that upon notice? My client never received notice, as she was statutorily owed.
Well, notice is.
She had actual notice in 2014, it appears, based on the
Yeah,
letter.
January let's not have like a court hearing here. Yeah, because your letter does say that she was on notice January 2014, and even with 90 days, I don't know if it's 90 or 10, but even with 90, we're now July
Yeah,
1st,
that-
2015.
To clarify, that notice was not a notice that the county provided to the applicant. It was, they
Actual
became
notice.
they became aware of it at that time
Because
and then
of fence
contacted
building.
us, and we've,
Yeah, because of fence building, but, you know, the first legal question is what we call the delayed discovery rule. Like, you may have a specific amount of time in which to do something unless you didn't know you were supposed to do something. And then when you do become aware of that, knew or should have known, then does your statutory time start to begin then. So anyway,
And-
there's an appeal from what? If we have two things, we have an administrative approval of the lot line adjustment, and then a planning commission approval of a certificate of compliance is an appeal as to both. At any rate, I would like, rather than doing this all now, I'd like an opportunity to talk to county council, maybe Barbara or Shirley or whomever, and then continue it for a couple weeks.
Is that a motion?
Yes,
Okay, I second that.
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
so this item is continued to the 6 PM hearing, July 15th, at the Planning Commission.
Clarification, Mr. Chair, what is actually coming back to us?
It's going to be the light net adjustment?
Well, we won't be bringing back a defense of the appeal. We'll bring back, we'll have an additional discussion on whether it's an appealable item or not.
So there'll be information.
Whether an appeal lies,
Yes.
without handling the merits of the appeal.
Yes.
Just procedurally, whether it's timely or not. Because if it's not, then there's no point in talking about the merits.
Right. Okay. Next item. The general plan, and we got quite a few speakers here today.
Okay, so this item, the purpose of today's hearing at the Planning Commission is to review and recommend adoption of the draft 2035 general plan and certification of the EIR to the Board of Supervisors. The commission's comments and recommendations will be forwarded and are included in your staff report. Those are found in Exhibits A through E to the draft Planning Commission resolution, which is attached as Attachment 1, and the other recommendations approved by the County Planning Commission during the hearing. What you have before you, or what you were provided with, there's two binders. I'm going to walk you through those real quick. So you have the brief staff report at the beginning. You have Exhibit A, which is the general plan, the revised public review draft dated May 6, 2014. This is the document that was approved at the joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the board. This was the document that was, I'll say approved, but it was the document that then the EIR was based on. Exhibit B is the general plan errata. These are changes to the general plan based on either mitigation measures or comments we received or comments from the board or commission or some factual errors that we've been tabulating as we go through the process. Exhibit C, which is the second binder, is the general plan, oh, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Exhibit C is in the first binder. It's the general plan final EIR. Those are the responses to the comments received as a result of circulation of the EIR. Exhibit D is the general plan CEQA findings of fact and the statement of overriding considerations. And Exhibit E is the final EIR mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which lists the mitigation measures and the responses. Then the second binder is then the circulated environmental document where the comments were based on. So the general plan, I'm going to give a brief, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michael Groves, our consultant. The general plan is a comprehensive update of the county's general plan and will replace the existing 1992 general plan. This general plan includes a revised land use element, an economic development element, circulation element, public facilities and services element, natural and cultural resources element, health and safety element, and administration elements. It does not include the housing element. We are working on that now in-house. So the last housing element was approved in 2010. So we've been doing this since 2007. In 2007, the county began having stakeholder interviews and workshops and sending out surveys. This resulted in a draft work program that was approved in 2008. The draft work program identified 5 goals for the county to pursue in its 2035 general plan, which is balancing growth and agricultural preservation, protecting natural resources, maintaining a place-based identity, increasing economic opportunity, and repairing the expanding infrastructure. I think it's important to know also, again, this was 2008. This was the priorities of the county in 2008. A lot of things have changed since then, but I don't think these goals have changed. Between 2008 and 2010, the county consultants prepared a background report, which took a snapshot of the conditions in the county. During the same time period, the Vision and Guiding Principles report, which refined the input from stakeholders and the board into a vision statement for the general plan, was adopted. In addition, an Opportunities and Challenges report was prepared in 2010, and the Alternatives report also, which evaluated various alternative general plan proposals for their long-term social, economic, and environmental effects. The board selected a preferred alternative on April 26, 2011, and that alternative has been further refined through May 2014. The county released the draft DIR for the 2035 general plan in February of 2013 with public comments up to May of 2013. The board recommended modifications to the draft general plan and thus requiring a new environmental document. So that brings us to the May 6th general plan version, which this environmental document was based on, and the revised draft environmental impact report was circulated for public review March 23rd of this year through May 7th of this year. Your staff report has some major changes from the 92 general plan. It's got the public review and notice process, summary of environmental impacts, and the recommendation. I will turn it over to Michael now to kind of walk you through where we've been, where we're going, what we're doing here tonight, and then when he's finished, I'll give the staff recommendation for the record.
Thank you, Byron. Michael Groves, President of EMC Planning Group, for the record. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I will basically say that Byron's presentation hit all of the major high points. I handed you essentially a handout, and with some technical difficulties tonight, we're not going to put it on the screen. There's a few extra copies up on the table if anybody wants to grab it. But basically, it goes over what Byron talked about for the most part, so there will be some portions I will skip. Essentially, the purpose of the Planning Commission's hearing tonight is to take public input and then to recommend to the Board of Supervisors the 2035 general plan. So that's the purpose of the hearing tonight. The actions that you will be asked to take, and Byron hit some of those briefly based on what the exhibits are that are in your packet. And the two binders essentially make up the packet. The first binder has the actual resolution in it with the basic actions, and the second binder is the draft EIR, which is fairly large, so we just didn't include it in the first binder, so it's just referred to in the first binder. So that's volume 1 and volume 2. So the actions for tonight's meeting are a resolution that will be in front of you. That resolution will contain your recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. The recommendations include a certification of the final EIR, both Volume 1, the final EIR, and Volume 2, which is the draft EIR. That's the larger of the two binders on the chair in front of you. Adopt the findings and the statement of overriding consideration, which, as Byron said, that's Exhibit D to the resolution. Adopt the mitigation monitoring program, Exhibit E, and adopt the 2035 general plan as a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, recommending it to them, and that's Exhibit A and B with the errata included. As Byron talked about, the general plan has mandated elements. He already told you what those elements are. As he stated, the housing element has been completed previously in a process in 2010. It is up for review again, coming up within the next year or so. And so that's something that will have to be addressed fairly soon after the general plan is adopted. You do have three optional elements that were included in the general plan: economic development, public facilities and services, and administration. Those three are optional elements, but they were included as chapters in the general plan. And as Byron talked about a little bit of the background, this process started in 2007 with issue identification by the Planning Commission and Board, stakeholder outreach, and really engaged in 2008 when the county drafted a work program with a consulting team, and it was based on those 5 goals that Byron articulated already. The county hired a consultant team, and they prepared a series of reports. Byron mentioned those reports. Just to repeat: background report, vision and guiding principles report, opportunities and challenges report, alternatives report, fiscal impact analysis. And then they also led the community group. So basically the advisory community, or the GPAC, if you want to call it that, was also led by the consultants and the planning staff through a process of trying to gain outreach and trying to figure out the direction the county wanted to go with the general plan. So it was a long process starting in 2008. By 2013, a draft general plan was released along with an environmental impact report. There was numerous comments on that environmental impact report. The county wheeled it back, pulled back. One of the commenters tonight talked about the greenhouse gas issue and the cows. That was one of the issues, only one of the issues that was raised during that process. And you'll hear later that we went through a process of revising a lot of those analysis and looking at why they were coming up, the conclusions they were coming up with, and the approach that they took. So with that, in 2013, when the board and the Planning Commission decided to pull back, we came on board early 2014. We held a kickoff meeting with the Board of Supervisors and provided direction and suggestions about revisions to the 2035 general plan based on what we had heard from the board and from all the comments that were given in the draft EIR that had already been released and out on the street. The board made some decisions in terms of direction in that first kickoff meeting. They also scheduled a joint Board of Supervisors Planning Commission meeting in which we went through as many of the issues as I can remember that we talked about, just all the way from traffic to greenhouse gas issues, air quality, et cetera. So, and including some of the new community stuff, and all of those were in the decision-making process. And so we made decisions through that meeting, through that workshop, by direction from the Planning Commission and board members to make recommendations for changes in the general plan and policy. We came back on May 6th to the Board of Supervisors with those recommendations that we had heard at that workshop, and went through basically chapter by chapter with the board and had them give us a thumbs up or thumbs down on the policy direction changes that were being made. That occurred. The board accepted back up on the word adopted, the board accepted the draft general plan that night so we could lock it in and begin the environmental impact report process again. As a part of that acceptance of the plan, it was locked in as a project description, so we began re-looking at the environmental documentation. We revised the draft EIR into what's now you'll see as RD EIR, which is a revised draft EIR. AMBAG released the new model for traffic. We waited until so we were done in May. If you remember, we waited until about September or so to get that model, September, October. We did a water supply evaluation and revised water supply evaluation and completed that. Had never been completed. We did a traffic peer review analysis, and that fed into our traffic section of the EIR. We did a new air quality and GHG peer review, and that fed into our analysis in the EIR. And then we revised the administrative draft EIR and had that ready for staff review in December, right around Christmas time of 2014. Staff then reviewed the administrative draft in early 2015, and the revised draft EIR was sent out on the street, as Byron said, between March and May. It was basically the 23rd of March to May 7th. We received a number of comments on that, and you've seen those comments. They're in the final EIR, and they're responded to in the final EIR. And then after we responded to and created the final EIR, which was just in the last month here, basically month and a half, we then prepared this packet that's in front of you with staff's assistance for the staff report, the resolutions, the findings, the mitigation monitoring program, and the general plan errata. So those are the pieces that are in front of you. The staff report, I think, does a decent job in terms of summarizing the public outreach. So the public comment over an 8-year period is a lot of comments and a lot of input. And so I think there's been a lot of good input to this general plan process that we've heard just in the time we've been involved, and it's been about 2 years. And so with that, we're asking the Planning Commission tonight to hold another public hearing and take input and consider that input prior to your recommendation to the board. And then we ask you to look at the resolution and consider the resolution with all of the materials attached to it for a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. We currently have the Board of Supervisors hearing scheduled for July 21st for their consideration of the general plan. And if you go to that, just as you're moving along, if you go to the third page in this handout I gave you, it's a green page. That third page is the one that has basically the action on it. It talks about the resolution in it, and it just summarizes what the attachments are. So when you take an action to adopt the resolution, you're essentially recommending to the Board of Supervisors the adoption of the general plan with the errata. So they're going together. You're recommending certification of the EIR. You're recommending adoption of the findings and statement of overriding consideration, and you're recommending the adoption of the mitigation monitoring program. So those, and I can go back over those after the public hearing if you want me to just walk you through those again, but that's essentially the action you're taking tonight, and that's what that packet consists of. And I know the findings are long. There's 60 some odd pages of findings, so it's not a short piece, but it is a good set of findings and a good packet, I think, put together for your consideration tonight. I'm available for any questions that you might have, and I'm also available after the public hearing as well.
Any questions, anyone?
Just a housekeeping matter. Michael, do you have PowerPoint of slides of some of these figures so that if we do get into a substantive discussion about anything, we can call up one of the figures on the screen instead of looking at the small button?
Yeah, I don't have them in PowerPoint. Well, I may have something, but I'll have to look. I don't think I do have them, but they are in hard copy in the general plan. So your packet has all the hard copy figures in it, and then I have a copy of the wine quarter adjustment which was made, which was one of the only other figures that was adjusted. And the only other figures were just cleanup figures. The transportation figures were adjusted just because they were in like 3 different figures and we just wanted to consolidate them.
Right, but in terms of looking at 4x5 inch black and white picture. We don't have that available to project
Oh,
onto a
well,
screen.
and that's how you got it?
Yeah.
Okay. I can show you my copy. That'll give you a much better copy. Which one are you interested in?
3-5, I think, is a pretty good one.
That's out of the EIR,
This is out of,
because
That's
that's,
into
if
the
it's,
general
if it's
plan.
copied like that, it's out of the EIR because you had already received it on disk, so we were trying to
oh,
save paper. And I can look on the laptop over there from previous presentations, there may be
Maybe
something still
something on
there.
there, yeah.
I just think it'll be helpful for, if anyone wants to talk about something in the county, it's, you know, a picture tells
Yeah.
1,000 words.
Sure, yeah, we
Sure.
had some, like I said, some technical difficulties, so we
Right.
don't have a.
Well, Byron had some computer problems today, so his computer was down, and I've sent him the PowerPoint, this PowerPoint a couple times, and it just hasn't gone through, and so we're just having some technical difficulties. But I do have both the EIR and the general plan, and I have full color copies of the maps here. So I can't put them on the screen, but I do have hard copies if you want to look at them.
Any commissioners, no more questions?
Oh, ready to jump, not till later.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I could ask for members of the public, since we don't have the clerk, if you could please fill out a speaker card when you speak, and you can just drop it on the counter over there. And then please state your name clearly for the record when you do speak. Thank you. I forgot I had this too. So we could put the maps up there from that. And if you want to take a short break, I can put some maps up on the screen.
I think it'd be worth it, because
Take a 5-minute recess? Okay. Recess.
Because I think we want to be able to see the new community study areas, the wine corridor.
It seems like we should probably go to the general plan now, not the EIR, just because, well, here's another map, I don't know what that is. But yeah, see, there's your, yeah, that doesn't really help. If you go to the general plan, then you can easily, there's so many more maps that are,
I mean, we spent 3 days making copies.
see, we can do it, we have a staff that's pretty efficient at production, or we'll take it to Kinko's, and we're really efficient with them.
Try to.
But yeah, just without the budget, our contract calls for a few copies, I'm giving it to you to publish, so I so you're real close with each other. That's why I was thinking the general plan, because they're right on top of each other. And then go again, I think there's another one. You know, there's close-up areas, and so now you can pretty much, you know, and you've got some of the study area boundaries in there. And then we can go a little bit farther, and you can get the wine corridor. Those are the new study areas. Okay. And then, you know, we get onto the next thing, and then there's wine corridor. Which one is that? That's commercial nodes. Right. So you can see they're closer to each other than in the EIR. They're going to be all over the place in the EIR.
Let's go pick one.
I go to that land use map that's not the whole county, that just has Hollister, and because that's kind of at the head of it.
Yeah.
And then we can go up one if they want to see the whole county. Stay on that one, and then everything after that just gets better. So that one there. And then if you want to change it, what happens? We just go up or down, right? Yeah, get all the other garbage out of there. Where's the camera coming from? Well, yeah, can you move it? How does it shoot? It's not shooting from here.
No, it's
shooting into it.
connected through cables up to,
Oh, I see, yeah. So you
coming through here. I don't have the ability to.
can't really adjust that screen up there, right? Okay.
Oh, we'll make going good. Start with this and then.
And can you go sideways? Can you take it sideways? If you go like this?
There you go. Wait, what is this? That's going from page to page by going sideways.
Yeah, it goes from page to page. See, that goes page to page, it doesn't go. I thought you might shift the thing for you to on the full screen. I wonder how I'm going to get on the full screen.
I don't know how to do it, and we don't have people here.
You need one of those Michaels in here. It's not this one.
Flag me.
Who does?
We'll look over there. Okay. Flag me if there's something that you want to talk. I'm gonna go over there so I can operate the computer, toggle between maps if necessary. No, you're fine. Okay. I didn't notice.
I was saying, that's why I'm standing back here, I'm like, I think I'm crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not a very great picture either.
You ready, Byron?
Okay, what we're gonna do is we've got the general plan loaded onto this computer, so everything in the general plan will be able to project as well as we can onto the screen behind us. So hopefully we'll be able to, and there's all the maps that are in here, so hopefully we'll be able to satisfy what we're trying to do here.
Thank you, Byron.
Thank you. Okay, back to the meeting. Anybody wants to speak? It's got 3 minutes. Byron, you do have a clock, correct?
I do have, yes.
Okay. You're allowed 3 minutes to speak on the agenda item. Yes. So public comment's officially open.
Are you calling names?
I can.
Oh,
So, Mary, if you'd like to go ahead and
Okay.
kick us off.
Hi, I'm Mary Shaw-Coron from Aromas, 501 Ricardo Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the 2030 general plan. I wanted to, I apologize, I haven't been able to come to meetings in the past because I was busy with Measure J, but my concern with the general plan is that the preferred alternative encourages growth in the new communities which are in the unincorporated areas. And I think one of the goals of the general plan was actually to preserve as much ag land as possible and protect natural habitat. I think actually the preferred alternative works against that when you have a lot of these developments, these new communities. One of them I remember last year, someone presented on the map. It's in the Rocks Road area. You know, these are all very scattered. I think that a better alternative would be the alternative to the city center growth alternative, which wouldn't have all this traffic going back and forth. I mean, I just drove from Aromas here, and the traffic was awful. That's why I was a little late. So I really think that one of the reasons you should really delay maybe the adoption of the general plan. There's a whole slew of legislation that was passed recently, just a few weeks ago, by the state Senate. It's a sweeping climate change package of 12 bills. And, you know, it's probably going to be reworked a bit, but something is going to be passed. And these are considered landmark legislation. They do a few things, and you know, not all of these things may be as relevant for this discussion, but the one that's most relevant for the discussion here, especially with these spread out new communities, is the reduction of gasoline use on our roads by 50%. This is by 2030, I believe. And this plan is 2035. So one of the things I would urge you to do is we have just gotten legislation in the state of California for some very landmark climate change laws. You know, we don't know what the final versions will be, but I do think that it might be wise to slow down your finalization of this, because your general plan may be somewhat irrelevant, you know, after this package of sweeping climate laws get passed. Some of the other ones include increasing energy efficiency of existing buildings by 50%, switching to renewables, 50% of our energy use. I think that, you know, it may be worthwhile to take a pause here and see what all of this new legislation, you know, how that would impact your general plan before you finalize it. So anyway, that's my main comment. And as an aside, I wanted to say that the map of the new community that's in Rocks Road that I saw last year when I attended one of the, I think it was actually a meeting of the supervisors. I was very concerned about the fact that these new communities, like the one on Rocks Road, are in areas that have no water. You know, the one that was proposed is near Ballantree, which now is totally dependent on Rome's water. All their wells went dry a number of years ago. It's not far from Rancho Larios, and you know the story of that one perhaps as well. San Juan Bautista would not provide them with water. There's no water there. So Aromas Water District is providing them with water. So you should really think about water as another reason for, you know, maybe looking at something else besides the preferred alternative and these new communities. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
The next speaker card I have is for Andy Chacarone.
Oh, you're up to it? I'm just delivering. My butler's not here today.
Good evening. My name is Andy Shaw-Coron. Live at 501 Ricardo Drive in Aromas. I don't envy the process you're involved in, because it seems like the ground is shifting under you as you try to make the plans for 2035. We've just gone through the worst drought in California's history, which wasn't in existence when you started this process, and requires you to step back and think a lot more about water than you might have thought about water before. That's one. The second is that even some of the hardest heads out there are beginning to realize that there is something going on seriously about climate change, enough so that the state Senate is passing sweeping legislation, and that the Pope is getting himself in lots of trouble by saying that he has to stand up and talk about the survival of the human species. So if he has to rethink that and stir up as much trouble, so do we all have to start thinking more about how we do things. And then third is, you know, we start looking at resources differently. For instance, my wife mentioned the Rocks Road project. Now, they just did that huge highway interchange out there, and it's clear that that area there is very sensitive habitat, because you've never seen a project anywhere where they put more effort into planting of native plants and restoring. It's unbelievable, because they realize that that's a sensitive area. That area is probably not a good area to be doing developing. It's the headwaters for Carneros Creek that goes down to Elkhorn Slough, and it's the preservation of these kinds of areas that is going to be the foundation for economic health for our county. If you look at a place like Cannery Row in Monterey Bay, all that huge development and economic prosperity that's grown up there is because they protected Monterey Bay. It's, you know, they go part and parcel. You can't create a healthy economy without thinking very long and hard about the quality of your environment. And I think that given the shifting terrain that we're on, I think you may need to do some rethinking about the plan. And I do think that the city-centered alternative is probably a better one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker card I have is for Scott Fuller.
Chairman Rodriguez and Commissioners, thank you. Scott Fuller representing San Juan Oaks Golf Club. In May of 2013, San Juan Oaks submitted a comment letter to the previous draft that went out, and I have that comment letter here I'm going to give to Byron. Thank you. And I'm going to talk about part of that comment letter today, which is it relates to the new community study areas. So at that time, we stated that we were not comfortable with the handling of the new community study areas in the DEIR, that San Juan Oaks did not request to be within the new community study area overlay, and that our property was distinct from the other areas shown as being within new community study areas, in that we already have a developed golf course, we have an approved vesting tentative map for a master plan community, and we have a development envelope established by a PUD. So in the letter, we reserve the right to withdraw San Juan Oaks from the new community study areas, and to withdraw our lands from that, including our PUD designated lands. Now, I understand that in the newer version of the EIR, some of the issues have been addressed, but I am here tonight to say that we are still, having reviewed so far, we're still not fully comfortable, and we want to still reserve the right for San Juan Oaks to withdraw our lands from the new community study areas. We're going to reserve that right until we go through the process, we see how the community deals with these in front of the Board of Supervisors, and that the new community study area plan or concept is finalized in the new general plan. And we want to reserve our right to withdraw our lands from that until that time, until we have further time to see how the Board of Supervisors visualizes the function of these areas and its effect on San Juan Oaks. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker card is for Marty Richmond.
Good evening. My name is Marty Richmond, and I live in Hollister, and thank you for your time. And I don't come to these Planning Commission meetings very often, and you should be grateful for that. But I would like to say this. In the Army, we used to say that no plan survives the first close encounter with the enemy. Well, obviously, this plan is not surviving the passage of time. I'm so disappointed that after 7 years, it's not absolutely perfect. I can't tell you that. People are going to come up here and say, it's not absolutely perfect, so I object to it. Well, we have not figured out a way to stop the clock. The clock keeps moving, and no matter what we do, the clock will continue to move. So all you can do is make your best forecast for the future, cross your fingers, and I think you've done a good job of the forecasting. Let's hope you do a good job of the finger crossing. As far as specific projects go, no matter what you put in the general plan, I assure you of the following. Every project will be challenged by someone for some reason. Sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad reasons, sometimes for very personal reasons, sometimes for economic reasons. So the idea that you should change the plan now that you've worked on for 7 years to exclude some area, whatever area that might be, whether it's next to my house or next to Aromas or somewhere in between, because we have a worst drought in recorded history. And by the way, this is not the worst drought in history for California. They've had 1,000-year droughts that have been worse and lasted longer. Every long drought's going to be the worst one in history next time. All those will be challenged as appropriate, and I have no interest in any particular one of them. But I assure you somebody will object. So let's get on with it. It's been long enough. I'm not sure that it's worth that we're 7 years better than we were when we started, but we put a lot of effort into it. We put a lot of time. We put a lot of money. And now all we can do is hope for the best. If you stop today, things will change tomorrow. If you stop tomorrow, they will change the day after tomorrow, because that's the way the world is. We don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. We're making our best guess for the future. We're laying out some broad strokes, and I hope everything works out. So I encourage you to just accept the errors that are in the plan the way they are, because we don't know. We may be fortunate and stumbled into the right thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I have no further speakers, Barry.
Anybody else wants to speak?
Do I give you one of these? Mine's blue. Commissioner Rodriguez and Commissioners, my name is Michael Weiler. For the past 20 years, the Weiler and Johnson family has owned a parcel of land on the interchange on the 101 and the 129 highway. I have 2 points regarding, or our families have submitted 2 comments related to the draft, and I just want to bring up 2 of those comments. The first is the regional commercial land use designation around the interstate, and we're just requesting that some specificity be inserted to the general plan regarding that area, just so, moving forward, if anything happens or if any further commercial development in that area goes forward, there's no guessing, or there's no further amendments, just so everybody knows where, the use stops and where the lines are, where the designation stops. The second issue is the 400-foot setback for the scenic highway, I believe, along Highway 129. So that would go through the regional commercial land use, and it just seems counterintuitive to have the 400-foot setback through the regional commercial land use area, where, obviously commercial development in that area would want to be closer to the roads, closer to the highway for, availability and just for people to see passing through, not only Highway 101, but 129. Those are the only 2 comments that I have. I'd be pleased to answer any questions if there are any.
Commissioners? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
No more speakers? One more.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm John Ivankovich. I live on Buena Vista Road. I have to plead ignorance. I didn't read the plan, and I don't think I'm going to read it. It's really thick, small type. But I was sort of shocked into reality a couple months ago, and you might have remembered me coming before you to protest this solar farm on Buena Vista Road. Since that time, I've had a chance to learn something about solar power, and I'll give you just a broad picture of what the cost of solar power is. It's not free. It's extremely expensive. I did some rough calculations, and I found that if you want to use solar power, and not just putting something on your house and using the power when you get it, but if you really want to be serious about that as a source of energy, to replace the Moss Landing power plant, you'd have to do two things. You'd have to build a very big battery, and the battery would be something like San Luis Reservoir, maybe not that same size, but you can collect the power when the sun is shining, and shining clearly at the most, you point the thing, anyway. So you collect it, and then you've got to store it for when the sun's not shining or it's not shining so brightly. So you'd have to have a very large reservoir. So you collect this power, and then you store it, using some of it as you go, whatever. So in addition to having a large reservoir, you would have to have something like an area covered with panels that would be something in the neighborhood of 100,000 acres. And you can imagine the environmental impact of 100,000 acres of solar panels. Now, it might be 90 or 75, it might be 175,000, but it's a tremendously large area. And I think that the reason I tell you this is that I sort of sympathize with the decisions you have to make up here, because it's really difficult to understand the impact of your decisions. But I just wanted to remind you of my protest of converting that really beautiful dirt. There, you know, God's not making that stuff anymore. We're covering it up with houses, etc. And I believe people should be able to live in San Benito County and enjoy the benefits of life here. And if we have to cover up some of our best soils when we get rid of the not so best soils, I understand that. But I think it's a mistake to take and put solar panels on prime ag land. I don't know what the people got for that land when they sold it to those people, but in the big picture of it, you know, your taxes and mine went to subsidize the purchase of that land. And it wasn't purchased at a low price, I can assure you. And then we have to subsidize that power through our PG&E rates. Now, if we want to put solar panels on our houses, go for it and do it. But you pay the own cost of it. Don't ask me to pay it for it. If you want to put solar panels on prime ag land, do we really want to do that? Because solar power may be 50 cents a kilowatt hour, nuclear may be 5 cents a kilowatt hour, hydroelectric 6 or 7. But we ought to know the true cost of it. And so I'm asking you, I guess I have a question for you. What does this general plan amendment say about putting solar power on prime ag land? Is that addressed here at all? I mean, Panoche Valley, fine, go for it. That's not prime ag land. But to take and cover that really great dirt, I'm asking the question, if you could address that.
John? Am I on? Okay, John, because I know you and you're a friend, I'll speak to this a little bit. And you know, we're up here as commissioners reading this document. We're not the experts. But how I read this and how I read San Benito County, and I'll address a few other things for people while we're at it. Prime ag land here is sacred, okay? So we're not going to allow prime ag land to be used for much of anything other than prime ag use unless there's mitigating issues that say something has to be changed. Solar is addressed in here, and it's encouraged. And you know me, you know I have solar on my roof, and I believe in keeping a very low carbon footprint and conserving fuels and everything else. But everything is sort of addressed. This document is really not a Bible. Okay, it's really a guidebook that's updated on a regular basis. Like the housing element can be updated and usually is updated more often than the whole document. But this is a dynamic process, and we're changing things all the time. We're also, you could allow variances to different parts of this document at different times, which sort of gives us a clue that maybe things should change in those variance areas. But prime ag land in this county, in a right-to-farm county, is still very sacred. And there's nobody that I don't think this, I can speak to the whole commission, but for me, It's like, I'm not going to plant a lot of houses because, like you said, God quit making this stuff a while ago. So it's going to have mitigating circumstances for anything that's even fringeful on prime ag land. So what's that do? That sends us off into range land or land that has a really hard time to support itself, okay? Which then actually drives us maybe away from the close to city area and pushes us out into the county areas sometime for the new growth elements. And then somebody spoke about water. Every project that comes up has to prove water, and different districts have to prove that they have the ability to be able to supply. So water is always in our face. This drought didn't just change things. We're concerned about water all the time. So we've been working on this for 7 years.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to hold back on this thing.
Yeah.
I just want to point out to you, words don't mean anything anymore. They call that prime land grazing land. And for that excuse, you guys allowed it to go on.
Well, that had some mitigation, and you were at the meeting when that happened. And the landowner says they didn't have water, and the cost of the well would override the value of the prime ag. So,
Well, someone would buy that land and put a well on it. And the city is now making water available from the city. I've gone over my time, thank you very much, but I think I've made my point, right? I'd like to protect it, and I think words should mean something. That's not grazing land. That's prime ag land. The fact that the owner didn't have the money to put in a well, that's another issue.
thanks, John.
Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is John Eade from 4760 Santa Ana Valley Road. Thanks for letting me speak. When John got up and talked about solar, it brought something to mind that has been affecting us lately out in Santa Ana Valley Road drastically here in the last month. We put in solar for our pumps and for livestock and our house a couple of years ago, and then some of the neighbors put some in. Foster Farms put in solar, and what it's led to, I don't know if you people have been following what's happening in Oahu, Hawaii right now, where they're having these huge problems with all their solar facilities, especially on rooftops. But what happens to mine is I've got to turn my solar off in the daytime or I can't run my pumps because the power is so high in the PG&E lines, it'll shut my pumps off because of the high voltage in the PG&E lines along with the solar. And my neighbor, it blew the lights out in her chicken incubators. It burned up their ice box or cooling unit in their barn. It melted the wires in their main switch box in their house. About 2 weeks ago, it melted a big copper line in one of my new surge protectors, and the lawyers just sent a letter to PG&E this week and put them on notice that they're going to have to do something about this. And if you have anything in this general plan where you're requiring rooftop solar, you better go on the internet and see what's happening in Oahu and even Maui, which mainly uses wind. They're having huge problems because HEC, which is Hawaiian Electric Company, they can't handle it. And just like out here, PG&E their facilities do not handle the solar that we're generating now. So if you're going to mandate this, you better make sure PG&E is on board. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers? No? We're going to close the public comment. Byron, any commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say.
Okay. Go ahead. Commissioner Lowe?
Thank you. See, Michael, I guess I'll be asking you questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I was just going to respond to some of the public comments if you wanted me to. If not, I'll just wait and,
It's up to the chair.
I don't see it that it's necessary, do you? Did you hear?
I don't think it's
Did you guys
necessary.
hear anything you needed a response to?
No.
Commissioner Lowe was kind enough to yield to me for a minute, because I just want to, as a point of clarification, and I'm kind of checking against my own memory, I believe that this is only the second Planning Commission hearing on the general plan, correct? The first one being a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors in March of 2014. And that is a little bit difficult, I think, for some of us, Michael, with all deference to you and your office and the board, in that it's almost frustrating because I, for one, personally encourage and welcome an opportunity to be more collaborative with EMC and with the county and talk about some things before everything was so pretty and put into binders and so forth. So I don't think that any of us should be too reluctant to voice that which we could have voiced all the way along tonight. And I don't want to hold back in that respect, because this is only our second time to talk about the San Benito County General Plan, which is a huge deal. The first, again, being that joint workshop with the Board of Supervisors where, the Planning Commission, let's face it, they kind of took a back seat, and rightfully so, because they're the board. So I just wanted to lay that as a groundwork, and I'll give the floor back to Commissioner Lowe.
and Commissioner, just let me respond to that just from it's just my perspective, obviously. It's not the perspective of the whole process. I wasn't involved in the whole process.
Right.
So there was 4 years before I got involved, 4+ years, actually 5 years before I got involved. When I got involved, the only window that we worked on the general plan was basically from February to May, that period of time in which we had the workshop. So we had three board meetings, essentially. One was a joint meeting with the Planning Commission. And those 3 board meetings and that joint meeting with the Planning Commission were how we determined how to recraft policy for this county based on the input that you had received from 4 or 5 years, a draft EIR going on the street, comments on that draft EIR, responses to comments on that draft EIR. And if you remember the presentation I made, it was like I went through mounds and mounds and mounds of information to try to synthesize down into what were the issues that we actually need to talk about. And so I agree with you. Since that May meeting, we had that joint workshop and we had that May Board of Supervisors meeting in which they said, we endorse where you are and where you're going. We haven't had meetings with anybody since then. It's been a while, but putting the new draft environmental impact report together, was a revised draft essentially, has taken from May of last year until now. So it's been over a year. But it has to do with, new look at transportation, air quality. The gentleman talked about greenhouse gas and how that was, being laid on the backs of the cows, and we had to go back and redo that entire analysis and relook at how San Benito County was approaching that, and came up with new strategies for reducing GHG in the county of San Benito that hadn't been put on the table before, and it didn't have to do with putting it on the backs of cows. So, so I understand your concern. One of the concerns I've talked to Byron about, is just the idea that it's hard for planning commissions and boards for us to go away for a year and write an EIR, and then you come back, and then you have a public hearing on the EIR, which technically you don't spend a lot of time speaking at those public hearings because you're trying to hear from the public.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're at a hearing where the thing is in front of you. So I get the concern, and just wanted to lay it out for you in terms of where I've been in the process.
No, I completely understand that, and I think you've done a good job of kind of jumping in there into a situation that wasn't yours necessarily. But, if I'll just describe the elephant in the room, because I don't think it's a secret to anybody, we really have 2 options right now. One is just to rubber stamp this and send it to the board with the idea that, well, it's a board matter anyway. It's just a board decision, so let's let them deal with it. Or, in which case we could all leave by 7:30. Or the second option is to kind of roll up our sleeves and try to do a little bit of heavy lifting here. You know, I do think from a philosophical standpoint, it's appropriate to have a planning commission do some of the heavy lifting, to do some of the issue spotting, to get things kind of in focus for the board when they do their deliberations, because it is ultimately their decision. So I'm more inclined to do the latter than the former and just rubber stamp something. So if there's, you know, things in here that I thought warrant further discussion, again, just because it's at the bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, I don't want to forego that opportunity to discuss them, and I don't think Commissioner Lowe wants to either, so I just wanted to lay that out as a preface.
Michael, I totally agree with what Commissioner DeFreeze just said, and I guess that if we could go back 6 months, I would be asking that maybe we look at different parts of this at a meeting and kind of tear it apart. But now we're here, it's in the ninth inning, and we have all these documents to go through and 4 days to do it. So I'm just going to jump into this. I understand that you weren't involved in some of these things, but basically the thing that I've gone through most definitely is the traffic. And I'm really concerned about what this document says about traffic. And I really need straightforward, hard answers on some of these questions tonight, or I won't be able to go forward backing any of this. On the traffic model that you did, where was your source for the information if it didn't come from AMBAG?
We had a peer review done by Hatchmont McDonald, and they're a very large traffic consulting firm in Gilroy. They have an office in Gilroy. They're also all over the country. And we asked them to go out and get their hands on the AMBAG model, the new AMBAG model, and get their hands on anything else that was available. There was a San Benito County model that was available through both COG and the city of Hollister. Both had it. I don't know where they got it, but they got it from one of the two of them. And then there was the existing model, the old AMBAG model that was run. So what they did is look at the old model, the new AMBAG model, the San Benito County model, and gave us a peer review direction and some strategy and approach for how to write the section for the environmental impact report.
Okay, and that sounds really good in theory, but if AMBAG isn't accepting this traffic study and Caltrans isn't accepting it, why are we moving forward with it?
I don't know that they're not accepting it. You know, the traffic study is the traffic study. It's an environmental impact report. They don't have a choice to accept it or not accept it. So
Okay, but, all right,
we're basing it on the AMBAG model, which is all Caltrans said to us, is base it on the AMBAG model, which we did. We used the San Benito County model where it was appropriate to understand local intersections, because the AMBAG model is a regional model, looks at 3 counties. So we used San Benito where we thought it was appropriate to better understand local intersections. And
Caltrans letter said that they're not accepting it.
no, that's not correct.
Well, okay, I don't know, but I think you need to get a letter then from Caltrans and AMBAG before we move forward, because I talked with Caltrans today, and I was told they are not accepting it.
I don't think they have a choice. They're not in the game in terms of accepting or not accepting. They can comment on an EIR like anybody else. And I don't mean to be contentious with you, Pat. It's just they can comment. They don't have a choice to say they accept it or not accept it. They can say, we don't like your strategy or methodology. They can say, we don't want to work with you on Highway 25, or if they can say a lot of those things. But I don't think that that's reality.
But if they don't want to work with us on Highway 25, that is huge to this community. Highway
course it is.
25 is one of the biggest problems this community faces right now.
I don't disagree with you. I think it is too. But I don't think it has anything to do with this EIR or the letter we got from Caltrans. I don't think that those are, I wouldn't bat an eye about it, to be perfectly honest. That's my approach, my opinion about it. I addressed that letter in the environmental impact report. I gave a response to comment on that letter, and I didn't see Caltrans saying that they didn't accept anything other than to say they basically want to make sure we use the AMBAG model, which we did, and they want to make sure that we understand that we have to go through their process essentially to improve Highway 25. And right now they have a process on a very large freeway that goes on Highway 25, and there's alternate processes that need to be looked at.
So
And
you can get a letter for this document saying AMBAG accepts the traffic model.
I don't need a letter from AMBAG, and neither does the county. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you wanted to delay the general plan and go get a letter from them, we can go do that. But they wrote a letter already, and we responded to the letter. So that's the process.
Okay, Michael, and I understand what you're saying, and you're talking in technical legal terms, and I understand that. But what I'm saying is that I live in this community, and it's extremely important for us to work with both Caltrans and AMBAG. And I guess if the county doesn't want to work with AMBAG, then we pull out, and that's an option too. But we can't be a member of AMBAG and not use their studies, as far as I'm concerned, okay?
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, and then it says in this document also that San Benito County no longer supports the widening of 101. When was that decision made?
San Benito, the response to comments says San Benito County does support the widening of Highway 101. What it says is the widening of Highway 101 is not necessary for the growth that's projected in the 2035 general plan. In essence, you don't have a responsibility to widen Highway 101 as a part of your fee collection or some other improvements that you're responsible for this general plan approval. It's a little bit of a technical issue because it's like the 25 issue north of the border, north of the boundary of San Benito County. You don't have a responsibility for that. You don't control that. So what we said was in the document, and it was revised to clarify that we were, as a county, in favor of improving Highway 25 north of the San Benito boundary, and we were in favor of improving Highway 101. We're saying from a CEQA standpoint, it's not the responsibility of the county, and it doesn't cause a significant impact to have the growth of 2035 in the general plan on those two stretches of roadway.
Okay, so basically we're saying that we support the widening, but it is not in this document, or it is in this document? I mean, I know it's in the regional transportation
It's
plan.
in the response to comments to the EIR, we said we support Highway 101 being widened and Highway 25 being widened. We said that specifically to that comment. What it also says is from a technical standpoint, and I know I'm talking gibberish a little bit because it's the technical side of things, on a CEQA side, the California Environmental Quality Act side, you have to determine if it's a significant impact or not for areas outside, like a cumulative impact for areas outside of your county. And what it's saying is it's not a significant impact. So Highway 101 does not need to be improved in order for you to approve this general plan.
Okay, and I understand that, but I'm saying in this document, do we actually show the widening of 101? I don't care who does it, but do we show the widening of 101?
No, we just show 101.
Okay.
And there is no existing widening of 101. There's only there's an intersection improvement at 101 and 25 that's gone through partway through the process. It's not funded yet. And there's some widening along that portion, but there's no, that I know of, there's no major widening of 101 that has gone other than maybe on a conceptual level.
Okay, but I thought there was a widening plan. Have you looked at basically our regional transportation plan, San Benito County, what they have adopted as the regional transportation plan of 2014, and put that into your document?
I looked at it a year ago. It's been a while. So I wouldn't be able to recall it off the top of my head, but yeah, I did look at it at one point.
Okay, how close does the traffic model that you use mirror our San Benito County document?
As far as I know, it mirrors it well. I mean, it's essentially, we're putting in the improvements that are in that original model.
Okay, on the widening of Highway 25 and the extension of Shore Road, the document basically calls out that the continuance of Shore Road has been on the books for over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it calls out especially the Southern Gateway project, or the land study that they did on the Southern Gateway through VTA. I believe that was a VTA document.
Mm-hmm.
And then VTA also did a 152 document. In those documents, though, in the general plan, in your comments, it makes it sound like that was a viable road. That road was basically, you said that it was too expensive and it wasn't even going to be explored. So I think it's a misconception to put in this document that it's been a 20-year project on the books. San Benito County, I know, just put it on the books as almost a footnote. If the commuters of our community would know that we're saying we're not going to widen, or we're not going to look at the widening of 25 for the next 20 years, according to this general plan, but we're going to look and do a study on a new road, that's just not acceptable.
The mitigation in the mitigation in the EIR has both. It has the widening of Highway 25 and it has the extension of Shore Road. Now, why would you think that Shore Road is important? It's not easy to sometimes conceptualize, but if you understand the fact that, and this is what I was talking about earlier, the border of San Benito County, once you leave the border of San Benito County and you're in Santa Clara County, VTA's got control of it. You don't have control of it. You can't improve Highway 25 unless they're doing something with it. You can cooperate with them, coordinate with them, do all those kind of things. So what Byron and I talked about was the fact that you could pass a sales tax, widen Highway 25 within the county, and you'll get a bottleneck when you hit the county border because it'll all drop from a 4-lane road back to a 2-lane road. And the mitigation in the EIR basically says you need to have an alternative outlet. And that alternative outlet was Shore Road.
But Shore Road isn't needed today. Shore Road is needed for new development.
Shore Road may be needed in order to alleviate the congestion in the county, and it says that in the EIR. It says the congestion on Highway 25 may or may not get fixed with Highway 25 being improved, depending on whether the improvement of Highway 25 occurs in Santa Clara County, and whether the interchange at 25 and 101 gets improved. If those don't occur, then Shore Road is your mitigation.
Okay, let's move on here to the number of new homes. We're saying in this plan that we're going to build 13,000 new homes, 13,000+ new homes in this 20-year period. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Does that include the new communities?
Yes. All the populations, and this was a point that was made earlier, the populations for city-centered growth, new communities, or city-centered growth, all the populations are the same, the housing counts are the same.
Okay, so 13,000 is the new growth number. So then we're talking about a county population of 95,000.
Correct.
Okay, and that's an increase of about 36,000. Now, when you looked at all of the traffic studies, has all of that basically an additional 100,000 car trips a day, was that factored in?
Yes.
So all of that was factored in?
It was factored in. And like I said, so it's clear, because there was confusion on the scenarios, it's clear that it's that full scenario, the number of homes that you mentioned and the population you mentioned, at either city-centered or non-city-centered. So it was looked at both scenarios. That's why we did 2 scenarios in the document.
Okay, and I think the one part of this plan that really bothers me is the new communities. I just really think that that's a waste of land. I think it's much more important. I mean, every planning document you look at, they talk about from the core out. And these new communities, I think it sends a false message to the development community. It's saying that we want to grow in pockets. And I really don't believe that's what's being said by this community. And I mean, every document that we have in here that the public signed on for or did anything, had any input in, it was keep our community small. And when you put new communities popping up all over, I just don't see how you accomplish that goal.
And I don't agree or disagree either way. It's not my point to advocate one way or the other. It's really the commission's place to advocate to the board. And so that's your prerogative to do that. I will tell you that I was not on board when new communities first got started. I actually came to a couple of hearings and sat in the back and listened to the debate over new communities. And then when I got hired, I was already up to speed on kind of the discussion back and forth. But eventually, at one point, the board ordered me to put new communities in the document, so I did that.
Okay. And then the only other question I have now is on water. And obviously, that's a huge, huge topic. And what I'm reading in this document is pretty much what I've read in documents for the last 20 years. That everybody's going to have these wonderful new ways of conserving water, and we're going to build all these homes, and it's not going to matter. Well, I think anybody in this room now knows that we are in the 4th year of a drought, and it matters in my household, and it matters in everybody's household in the state of California at this time. And to say that imported water is the answer, that's over $500 an acre foot. So it might be an answer at a huge cost. And I just really don't see how water is addressed adequately in this document.
Okay, so Commissioners, we did a water supply evaluation, and it was a technical document done by a completely independent consultant, and they charged me a fortune for it. And their conclusion, and this was with a single-year drought and multi-year droughts. So they took a really conservative scenario. They determined with the population growth expected that we could meet that population growth with the existing water systems and groundwater that we have. Not that we don't have to expand the pipelines to get it to people, but just the source of water was adequate to meet the population that's projected in the general plan. Now, they could have come back and said it's not adequate to meet the population and you need to reduce your population. They didn't do that. So they came back and said sufficient water supplies, adequate existing water supplies, and they did not take into account the governor's current directive of water conservation and all the water conservation measures that each jurisdiction has to do. That was not factored in.
But imported water was, is that correct?
No, imported water wasn't factored in. They're saying with the water that's existing in your current source system now.
So that's the analysis of the aquifers then?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about the water coming over from San Luis, yeah, that's part of the system now, so.
But how do the aquifers get filled from the San Luis?
Yeah, I know it's a big issue around the entire state.
So I heard you say, sorry to interrupt here, but I just need a point of clarification so I don't have to come back to it. So you said that analysis was done independent of importing water, but I would think of San Felipe water as imported.
Yeah, well, and
so was San Felipe water in the analysis?
Yes, it was. Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, I just mean, I thought Pat was talking about new imported water. In other words, we're going to get water from a desal plant at Moss Landing and import it here, or we're going to truck water in, or some other source of water. But you have an existing system and way about the way you go about having your water supply source provided now. That's what I'm talking about. That was evaluated.
If Blue Valve gets turned off, are we in trouble?
I don't know if I can answer that, and I don't know that I want to answer it on the record. That's a tough question.
It's an important question.
Yeah, it is.
Because
yeah.
Blue Well getting turned off, I don't think is outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, Dan, I didn't do the evaluation personally,
Right,
so it's a tough question for me to answer.
I understand.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Pierce. Mr. Chairman, so Michael, similar to Commissioner Lowe, I'll just go through areas that are of interest and importance to me. That's not to say that other areas are not. These are just the ones that I wanted to discuss tonight, and they're not in any particular order. The first is as regards highway thoroughfare commercial. And specifically, since I'm the Commissioner of District 2 with Supervisor Botello, and have been for a number of years now, we have 101. And 101, as we know, runs from the Rappazzini cement stacks near the 25 intersection all the way down to the Red Barn.
Mm-hmm.
We also are all, I think, cognizant of the fact that San Bernardino County right now has not been able to take advantage of the thousands and thousands of motorists that travel through our county on a daily basis, especially weekends. It's unbelievable, the traffic out there these days. And so we're missing out on highway commercial tax dollars, et cetera. They can stop in Gilroy, or they can go down to San Miguel Canyon and go to McDonald's and so forth. So That's been kind of the sentiment of the board. I think that was the sentiment of you when you were a supervisor, Commissioner Lowe, right? Something needs to be done. On the one hand. On the other hand, we are an agricultural, rural, beautiful county. We don't want to look like Gilroy or Santa Clara County or San Mateo. And then another thing that's true is that it's my understanding, and the director, Mr. Turner, can correct me here because I'm fuzzy on it. He might be a little fuzzy on it too. But Highway 101 in that area is some type of scenic highway. I don't think anybody in the county really understands what that means. In terms, and when I say what it means, I mean in terms of regulation, what you can do, what you cannot do, protections, all of that. I don't think it's ever been defined clearly. It certainly hasn't been defined that I've seen to the extent that shows some earnestness on our part to make it scenic. I can guarantee you, speaking of San Mateo County, that Highway 280 going to San Francisco, those folks know exactly what Highway 280 means as a scenic highway. And that's the reason why 280 is beautiful and 101 is awful, the Bayshore. So, although we want to encourage this type of commercial development in and around Highway 101, I think it's true to say that we do not want it to look like Gilroy. Nothing against Gilroy, I'm not slamming them, but you know, South Santa Clara County, Gilroy, they've allowed commercial development right up to the edges of the roadway, just like the Bayshore. I don't think any of us want that. So what I am proposing in a philosophical way, again, since this is the only second time I've had to talk about the general plan in the 14 years I've spent as a planning commissioner for this county, I would propose that we invigorate and define and put teeth into this scenic highway idea and designation. And number two, that we have breaks or abeyances or gaps in the scenic highway designation at key strategic locations where we want to encourage highway commercial. By my account, we already have 4 potential areas. From Santa Clara County line, we have Bedabel, which has a nice ingress-egress, on-ramp, off-ramp, and we already have an existing mobile home park there with soccer field and so forth. We've got the 129-101 intersection heading south. We have 156 and 101 intersection. We have the livestock 101 property. I need to disclose the fact that I currently represent them as an attorney, so I don't want that to, however, conflict with all my comments. But that is, it was before I ever was around. That is and has been a commercial use. And then lastly, we have the San Juan Road Red Barn area, which is already underway. So what I would propose, and I have met with Supervisor Botello about this also, as I said, is that we designate Bedabel, 129, that livestock existing commercial, and San Juan Road as the highway commercial areas. And 156 and 101, however, we keep that scenic. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, it is already. And 2, probably more importantly, that is the gateway into San Benito County for most folks.
And was it was 156 and 25, did you say?
No, 156 and 101.
And, no, yeah, well, there was 2 of them, though.
Oh, no, Bedabel?
So you got Bedabel, Livestock, San Juan Road, and...
So starting from the north and going south, so Bedabel, next would be 129. Skip 156, 101, which I'll get back to in a second. Livestock 101, which also has ingress, egress, turn lanes, and deacceleration. It's already built. And San Juan Road, which is already underway right now. So the San Juan Road, and Graham's here tonight. I don't know if he wants to comment on it, but San Juan Road is going to have a lot of highway commercial type of opportunities, and I think that's going to be great for our county to recover some of this tax revenue. But back to 156 and 101, I do believe that it would be in the best interest of the county and us as a community to keep that pristine, because like I said, A, it's already pristine and it's beautiful, and B, it is a gateway into San Benito County, and Pinnacle's gateway, you know, folks coming down, or if they don't take 25 and they want to come, or if they're coming from Monterey or anywhere else, they're going to presumably take 156 off of 101 and head east into San Juan Bautista, where I live, and into Hollister and the rest of the county to our wine trail, which I'll get to in a second. But I really believe that even when you cross the Santa Clara County line, when you come into San Benito County, it should signify to folks that are coming here, hey, this is nice here. This is different. This isn't San Mateo. This isn't Gilroy or Santa Clara County. You know, this isn't the Bay Shore. Look at this open space, and it's beautiful and agrarian and row crops and cattle. And I think that's what we have always been about, and I think that's why most of us moved here originally and why we love it here so much. So to keep that scenic, except for these opportunities for highway commercial, like I said. And then secondly, and I'm not sure how this is implemented, again, I'm just speaking in more philosophical terms, so Byron could probably, and you, Michael, could probably think about this more. Even in those commercial areas, those breaks in the scenic designation, otherwise known as perhaps nodes in the general plan document, even in those spaces that we do want or have said as a community, yeah, we want highway commercial there, that commercial development be accomplished using design review and setbacks and scaling and massing, and to make it look nice, so that it's not just anything haphazard. If you can do, an example that I always use, people have been here long enough, I've heard me say it before, is the Windmill Market in San Juan Bautista. The Windmill Market is a grocery store and a strip center. That's all it is. But you know what? It fits. It looks nice. And what would otherwise be a really ugly eyesore right on the 156 in Alameda in the historic San Juan Bautista is beautiful. So a development can be done. It can be lucrative. It can be profitable. You can earn tax dollars, garner tax dollars from it if it's done in the right way. So those zones, I would think, should come under heavy scrutiny for design and other aspects to ensure that they're done in the best way possible for our county, because I think we deserve the best. And then the last point, and this is actually Supervisor Botello's idea, that construction and development that happened in those commercial areas, nodes, breaks in the scenic designation, that one of the conditions that be implemented for development is that those businesses, In-N-Out Burger or whomever, somehow contribute to some type of preservation of the areas that we've designated as scenic. The word contribute I'm using in terms of perhaps some type of open space easement, agricultural easement, something that would help keep the beautiful areas beautiful and would still make it a lucrative effort on their part. So that's what I have to say about highway commercial and highway 101 going through San Benito County. I think it's a good balance. I think it achieves what we want as a community. I know that a lot of folks in District 2, Western San Benito County, would support that, I believe.
So Commissioner, just before you go to the next one, when you say contribute to preservation of scenic areas, are you talking about just along the corridors, or are you talking about anywhere in the county?
No, just along the corridors.
Okay.
I think it should be specific to that. So if 129 and if Highway 129 and Highway 101 are to be further developed commercially, that those developments then help fund and help achieve the county and community's goals of scenic aesthetic on the rest of the scenic highway. And I also want to just say this by way of disclaimer, that I'm fully aware of the fact that Mr. Johnson and Mr. Weir, and I think his son's here tonight, are interested in doing commercial development on that corner. That's a coincidence, in my opinion. None of my feelings have been swayed by what they want to do or in any other way. The reason why I and Supervisor Botello feel like 129 and 101 is appropriate is because, to be honest, it's not that pretty to begin with. We had a bunch of trucks there, and Willis Precast Concrete, and Anzar High School, and it just, it just seems like more of a, I'd like to see it stay beautiful, you know, but if you recognize the reality that we do need to capture motorist dollars as they pass through our county, then it's just a matter of finding the best spot, and I think that's a good spot. But it doesn't have anything to do with whatever it's called, Hollister Ranches, or, yeah, those 14 houses on that corner. So that's highway commercial. The next thing I wanted to mention is the wine overlay zone. I understand, Michael, or I heard you say earlier, Michael, that you curtailed it a little bit. I asked at the break what that curtailing was, because I wasn't, to be honest, up to speed on what that was, and I understand you just changed it to include San Juan Oaks, is that right?
That's correct.
And I also understand that the Sierra Club and others have given you a little bit of resistance on the idea of a wine overlay zone. Having kind of carried that flag for a number of years now, I can tell you that the wine overlay zone and encouraging San Benito County to become a Paso Robles type wine experience is hugely popular with everybody. We have obtained resolutions from the board, 5-0 with pats on the back, to continue to try to encourage wine growing, wine making, vineyards, tasting rooms, and wine-related businesses in this county. We see it as an opportunity for economic development. That's the right economic development, bringing tourism and just the whole Paso Robles experience, frankly. And what Paso's accomplished in 10 years is mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. And the money that they're getting from that is also mind-boggling. And the nicest thing about a wine tourism-based industry is those people come here from Silicon Valley, taste wine, stay in our hotels, have dinner at our restaurants, then they go home. We don't have to school them and police them and provide fire protection and everything else. So I just wanted to encourage you to maintain the energy and the emphasis on the wine overlay zone. I think it's terrific, and I think it's a step in the right direction for this county.
So, Commissioner, I do have just a color copy of the map, if you want to pass it down with the commissioners. It just shows the change. Although it's a change in the errata, and that's typically how we do it, I just went ahead and made the change in the map, and it just shows that it includes San Juan Oaks. Essentially, it just popped the line out to include San Juan Oaks, and it did not before. And that map had been done by the previous consultant. So when that was brought to our attention at your Planning Commission meeting, actually, I think by Scott Fuller, then we went ahead at your direction and made that change in the errata sheet. And then I just went ahead and showed it on the map. So if anybody wants to look at that, they can.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about something that's more of a stating a reality versus putting anything on a to-do list, and that is that nowhere in this new general plan or in the EIR, draft EIR, of course, is there anything regarding TDCs or sending and receiving areas. And the irony to that for me, and I think Byron, if he doesn't start smiling right now, something's wrong with him, is that for years, everybody had the same conversation about TDCs, and it went something like this. Wow, that's a really great idea. You identify as a community the areas you want to preserve, and you identify the areas you want growth, and the areas you want to preserve, those are going to be called sending areas, and they're going to send all of their development rights to the areas that you want to grow, and we'll call those receiving areas. So every time, and we've had TDC subcommittees and TDC meetings and just ad nauseum, but the rubber would hit the road every time when you start talking about where should these areas be. Oh my gosh. And then every time over the last, I don't even know how many years this conversation's been going on, we always answered that with one thing. Well, you know what, we're doing the general plan, so let's just wait till then. Let's figure all that out when we're doing the general plan. Oh, that sounds like good, so we just kicked the can down the road. Well, here we are. Here we are, and we haven't done anything with it. So I'm just pointing out a reality, but I don't want to talk about TDCs anymore if we're not going to, it's irrelevant. I mean, it's relevant for project-specific reasons. You know, if individual projects want to come in and tout as a part of their beauty pageant that, oh, and we've also acquired development rights from properties to increase our density and so forth, okay, fine. But in terms of the macro, larger county-wide program that people once envisioned, this ain't it. We're not there. And we're now at the point where we've said for over 10 years we were going to do it. We were going to do that work now during the general plan process. Has it 20 years? 20, yeah, for a long time. What a waste of time. I mean, all those hours spent talking about that stuff. And to me, the idea of special communities or special study communities, those almost, if you think about it philosophically, those almost operate like receiving areas, don't they? Because those are areas that are being pre-designated on a general plan as being perhaps appropriate for future growth. Okay, well, it's kind of AKA receiving area. But we haven't done anything to talk about sending areas, the other side of the equation. So as to the special community study areas, I frankly don't see the need for them. I don't know what they gain for us as a county, as opposed to anyone who thought that a certain area would be appropriate for future development could say so and then do a general plan amendment. And if it was as they thought and appropriate, then their general plan amendment would carry the day. But now, having on the one hand, identified receiving areas, but on the other hand, having done nothing to talk about what is it we want to protect, where are these sending areas, it just seems out of balance to me. It seems out of whack. It seems like we're giving up without getting. There's a loss but not a gain. So that would be my 2 cents on that. With that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Comments? You done? Okay, I'll be brief. I was on TDC, and actually we designated the sending areas, but not the receiving areas. And pretty much the entire San Juan Valley was considered to be a sending area. And the reason for not designating receiving areas is we didn't have a specific area outlined, but also if we were to designate receiving areas, it would dramatically change the value of people's property being in a receiving area, but also not being in a receiving area at that time. Now, TDCs were a different issue then. They're not so much of an issue now. I think we need to at least mention them in the plan and say that if they are to come back or something was to change in the future, we're open to it. I think we can handle that on the board, on the commission level. In fact, I think most that you discuss we can handle on a commission level. I see no problem with passing this tonight. I don't feel like we're rubber stamping anything, but maybe that's because I also said it on GPAC and bugged Jason out there, and a lot of the other meetings that were involved in the whole process over the 7 years. I was also a member of the Parks Commission when we worked on the master plan for the parks to kind of merge this into the general plan. So I got a different feel for it. As far as the 25, I am concerned about 25, but I think that will take care of itself. Also, growth. Growth is so multi-layered as far as the marketplace, what will be allowed in, and the cost of that infrastructure to put in. That will determine. Like in the beautiful areas around certain parts of 101 that are off of the roadways, the infrastructure costs are going to be so high, they're going to migrate to the 129 because that's easy access, it's more immediate access, things like that. So the other open areas. But I also feel that we can address those on a commission level on a case-by-case basis, but also when we pass this, we can also then work on tightening it up in maybe, I see some sub-zoning going on, and I'd like to designate certain sub-zoning within the county's zoning plan to sort of identify and be more specific in certain areas. But that's not for this document. That's something later on that we can work on. I just think, we really need to move on with this document. 7 years and all of the stuff that's held up, and I think a lot of economic recovery of the wine trail and everything else that this plan does do for us can start us going and start us during this recovery. If we keep putting this off, I've already been through, 4 downturns in the general market and commercial growth. I think the time is now. Now, 101, my dad helped build 101. It was part of the military industrial complex artery to get men and supplies and tanks and everything else up and down California between San Luis Obispo and Alameda and all of that. That was never really built with the idea of any kind of scenic involved. We just kind of lucked out in certain areas, and it's better. So it's never going to be a 25. It's never going to be a 280. And the access to the wine trail in Paso Robles on that major thoroughfare they have on 46 going over to Cambria and the coast, one of the reasons why that area is so accessible with the large roadways that they have going in there, that really helps that wine trail and that wine industry in that whole area. And it has allowed them to do that. Do I want to see that on Cienega Road? No, not at all. I want to try to keep the county as small as we can keep it without killing the county, without stifling the possibility of being able to capture some of the commercial sales tax to keep the county government going. We've been through 8 years of a forced moratorium in the city, and look what it's done for the city. So, so I think we need to step up to the plate, pass this, and move on, and then try to designate with Brian certain specific areas that we need to target, look at, and work on after we get on with this.
Commissioners, any comment? I don't have anything to say. Just absorbing now everything from the people and the planning commissioners here.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, go ahead.
So the recommended action tonight is what? What are the options? To approve this document as is, approve with changes and notes that you've made, Michael, that will be, we trust, relayed to the Board of Supervisors for the ultimate consideration, not pass it as is or with changes and continue it or something, I guess? What are all the options?
I think those are, you just articulated the options. You could continue it, you could pass it as is, two ends of the spectrum, or you could deny it, say we don't want to approve it. You could continue it, you could pass it as is, and you can pass it as is with additions to the errata sheet. That's what the errata sheet is. It's essentially additions that we've made. We've added the mitigations from the EIR into the errata sheet. They will become policy. All right? So, and then there's some graphic cleanups and things like that that are in the errata sheet as well that are just minor things. But that's what the errata sheet is for. And we would take that errata sheet and expand it and have a section in it that says these are the Planning Commission recommendations to the board to be added. A couple of comments I would like to make about two subjects, and I've heard you talk about TDCs before, so you know it's not new. I didn't know that it was going to come up tonight, but it is a good comment. The LU 4.9, and Byron can probably speak to this better than I can. The county shall maintain and implement voluntary transfer of development credit programs as an incentive to protect farmland and focus future development away from the most productive farmland. That was the middle of the road solution we came up with in that joint Board of Supervisors Planning Commission meeting when you raised that issue. And so we have a policy in here. It's not mandatory, it's voluntary. My experience with TDCs up and down the state has been that they're great ideas, as you talked about, really hard to implement.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have approval.
Almost impossible.
Yeah, you have to have approval of the property owners on both ends.
And you'll never
You have
get
to
that.
everybody to sign off on them. So having them in a voluntary sense, somebody wants to develop, and what happens a lot in Monterey County and other counties is we have an ag land trust, there's protection of ag land, people enter into development agreements, there's agreements struck where we're gonna have you do 1-to-1, 2-to-1 replacement of ag land that you're taking out of production, and here's where we want it. We want it in a strategic location that's gonna either protect scenic corridors, it's gonna protect
Farmland,
it's gonna protect growth in the city, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a really important piece. The comment that was made on the commercial nodes is a good comment, and we actually got that comment in the EIR, and we responded to the comment in the EIR very similar to what Commissioner Pierce is talking about. Essentially, we said, we think that's a zoning issue, and that protecting writing zoning standards that actually say this is what you can do in these commercial nodes, whether it's the boundaries of those, how high you can go, whether they're affected by the scenic corridors or not affected by the scenic corridors. The one change that's really relevant is if you don't think one of those nodes ought to be existing, then that's ought to be recommended to the board. So those are the type of things that you should say to the board, but I think it's a zoning issue. If you want to hammer out what those boundaries are in the general plan, then we would have to stop and sit down and do that in terms of a workshop or bring something back to you.
Well, if that's directed to me, I think that 156 and 101 should be eliminated as a node. And the main import of my comments was to, in the general plan document, absolutely designate Highway 101 from the Santa Clara County line to the Monterey County line as a scenic highway. And anybody who's ever been to San Francisco knows that 280 is a lot prettier than 101. And I don't care what the history of either road is. I mean, Native Americans used to use 101, and then the missionaries after that to get from here up to Mission San Jose. It goes back hundreds of years, and it was probably a deer trail before that. But right now, today, we have an opportunity as a county to say we want Highway 101 to look nice because our county's nice. So let's designate it as scenic, let's mean it when we say it, and then through zoning and everything else, let's put the legs underneath the table.
Right, right.
But Byron, wouldn't you agree that no one really knows what scenic highway means exactly as it currently sits?
There are multiple definitions, and we do have in our zoning ordinance regulations regarding scenic highway. So as part of implementing the general plan, we'll be looking at the scenic highway section of the zoning code. And so whether that might be the place where we insert the design review that you mentioned before. I don't know if we want to put in the general plan as part of a policy regarding the commercial developments in scenic corridors shall contribute to conserving the visual aesthetic, if that language can be incorporated now.
I like that a bunch.
Or if it's something that you could recommend to the board.
Either.
If I could interrupt for a minute? Can we do this outside of the general plan? Can't we go back and designate this as a scenic corridor after we pass the general plan? I mean, you know, we can designate highways scenic or whatever, right?
Well, you can pass an ordinance. Most of the implementation of a general plan turns out to be an ordinance of some sort.
Right.
That sets out the direction of what you'd like. And the zoning is one tool, and there's other tools. We're doing all the implementation ordinances currently for Monterey County after their general plan approval. So there's a whole series of ordinances we're doing to implement the policy direction. You're lucky in the sense that you have really less in terms of the amount of ordinances that are directed in here. They're really focused, and they're focused on the right things, you know, scenic corridors and agricultural preservation and those kinds of things. Monterey County got into a pretty broad spectrum of things, but they have a pretty broad county in terms of having, you know, Salinas Valley, which is kind of one climate and virgin, and then you've got the peninsula, it's different, and North County's different, and the deep south part of the Salinas Valley is different than the north part of the Salinas. So it's really diverse in that sense, so.
Does any of this trigger an amendment to the EIR, so we end up starting this whole EIR again?
If, you know, and I'll defer to Shirley and Nadia, who are your legal counsel, but my response would be depending on what it is that we're doing. My guess is no, if we're making, you know, minor adjustments to policies to add design review and those types of things, I don't think it affects the EIR. So it really would depend on what the change is.
That's what I was going to say, is just reiterating or emphasizing, or I use the word invigorating, the idea that Highway 101 in our county is a scenic highway. That's not going to do anything to delay stuff or recirculate an EIR or anything like that. It's just policy type language, and you'd put the legs underneath the table with zoning ordinances and implementation.
Okay, if you can put that into the language and pass it along to the board with approval, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
The one comment or question I have, Dan, is that the one thing you said about having the developers do something financially to maintain that corridor as scenic, I'm not sure I really understand what you're saying, but to me, it sounds like a bit of a disincentive, and that you're putting a financial responsibility on somebody to apply to somebody else's private land along that corridor. Doesn't seem, I mean, maybe I don't understand what you're asking, but.
Well, it has to do with this idea of mitigation, right? So like if you're going to convert prime farmland for some reason, like I had to do this with an Earthbound Farm project. We were going to be converting some prime farmland. I mean, granted, it was for an agricultural use, for organic distribution, but the fact remains that you're not going to be growing spinach on this land anymore. So to mitigate against that, we put an open space easement on a neighboring piece of land to say, like, okay, the bad news is that this isn't going to be in row crops. It's going to be something supporting agriculture. The good news is that we're now keeping this area in agricultural open space forever. So it'd be that kind of idea. You know, so if a commercial developer, let's say it's McDonald's or whatever, Hampton Inn, wants to develop on 129 and 101, for example, and really change that area, and it's, again, like as I said, I don't want to go into the details of this. I don't know how it'd be accomplished, but the idea would be that to mitigate against that loss, you would then, a developer would be encouraged or conditioned to contribute to some type of open space easement process or some kind of land bank thing, or, you know, some way to recognize the fact that they're going to be making millions and millions of dollars on that development. And as a result of their good fortune, shouldn't they then help preserve the rest as beautiful? That kind of idea. Exactly what the details of that would be, I don't know. I haven't worked it out yet all the way.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that corridor, and, you know, the east side of that freeway is just rangeland. You know, there's cows eating right up to the freeway. So how would you do anything to preserve that? You'd enter into an agreement with the landowner then?
Yeah, a lot of those folks would be more than happy to accept your money and put an open space easement on it, on their land that abuts or adjoins or is adjacent to Highway 101, because they weren't thinking of doing anything with it in the first place.
Okay.
So if someone from LA says, hey, I'll give you $100,000 if you let me put an open space easement for a mile on the east side of 101 or west side of 101, I said, yeah, great, give me your check. But now we know it's going to be protected forever, and it's not going to look like San Mateo.
Got it.
Okay.
Any questions, commissioners?
There was just a couple of things, and maybe County Council wants to weigh in, but there was a couple of things that were said by the public that I thought was important to just put on the record. One was a discussion about the Highway 101 corridor and that new interchange that's built there, and the environmental sensitivity of that area. And again, two sides of that. One is there's a good, solid series of policies in this plan that talk about environmental protection and particularly habitat protection and what you have to do in terms of studies and that type of thing for habitat protection. So I think that's really well done in this document in terms of directing staff on what they have to do. And then the second side of it is anything that happens there, you're going to have a look at. It's going to become to the Planning Commission as a development plan that you'll have to scrutinize for how they're going about whatever they're doing at that commercial node. So I just wanted to make sure that.
Michael, that's also going to trigger Fish and Game and Fish and Wildlife. I mean, they're going to come at that with both feet in the fire. So I'm not worried about any project going in there because they're going to have to be under a microscope.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize for the public that there's a high level of scrutiny both from the plan and from the agencies that are responsible for that habitat at that location, and it is recognized as a sensitive location with, you know, water and habitat and those types of things. One of the other ones that came up was policies for prime farmland protection, and there's quite a bit of policies. There's a whole agricultural section in here, and I was at it just a minute ago, but I turned away from it to look at something else, so just give me a second. It's on page 315 of the general plan, agricultural and rangeland, and that rangeland was added by the Planning Commission and board at that public workshop that we had, where you wanted it expanded beyond just prime agricultural land, that we really look at all of the lands that we have in terms of preservation, and that you take a look at those on an individual basis as projects come up. But there's everything from encouraging the diversification of agriculture in the community and expanding agriculture in the community to the right to farm and to ranch, both farm and ranch, and agricultural mitigation policy. So there's an agricultural mitigation, land mitigation policy that, and as it's implemented in Monterey County oftentimes, and I've seen it in other counties that I work in, there's an agreement struck, and either through a development agreement or a side agreement with the land trust to, come up with a 1-to-1 replacement or a 2-to-1 replacement, depending on what it is. So I just wanted to let you know that that's in there. Somebody also mentioned solar, and I think the concern that was raised is a very valid concern, and having the county be in communication with PG&E is really an important piece of the puzzle, because you can build as much alternative energy as you want, but if you don't have the infrastructure to support it, it doesn't help anybody, right? And the idea is to help in terms of offset our fossil fuels. There is a new rooftop solar law that comes into effect in, 10 days or 12 days or something like that. And it's requiring over-the-counter permits for rooftop solar. And it's requiring the planning department to come up with not a policy, but a procedure to expedite and sign off on rooftop solar at the counter. And they give you, the state's already given counties and cities a whole set of guidelines about how to do that. I just wrote the ordinance for another city. And so it's coming at you. Whether you like it or not, it's coming at you. Alternative energy is going to keep coming at you. So it's really important to be in coordination with PG&E. So I just wanted to raise that issue for the speaker that talked about that, because it's something that the county ought to be doing as a follow-up to the general plan.
Who does that coordination with PG&E, the board, as a practical matter?
Well, it would be the board directing staff and probably your Public Works Department doing that coordination.
Good to know.
And then we talked about the commercial nodes that were spoke about as being part of the zoning, and we wrote that in our response to the comments, so I just wanted to make that clear. And then there was some discussion, just for the record, about preferred alternatives in the plan. And I just want to be really clear that there's 3 alternatives that are discussed in the EIR, and then there's what the board really is directing. And the alternatives in the EIR were the no project alternative, the city center growth alternative, and then there was a larger parcel alternative. And then there's adding the new community study area. So there's a number of different alternatives being juggled, if you will. And so I just wanted to make sure that both the speaker and the public understood that there's a series of alternatives. And when she said alternative 1 is, or the preferred alternative is the new community study areas, the terminology is different in the sense that the board decided that would be the preferred alternative as a part of this process, but there are 3 other alternatives that are looked at in the plan. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And I don't have anything else. If you give us direction, Byron, do you want to move it forward? And County Council, if you have any comments, we're open to those.
Sorry, we were strategizing about another issue. What's the question?
Well, I was going to say a couple of things, and then if you want to, then I would look to County Council about what the recommendation, the exact language of the recommendation should be. But first, I wanted to make a comment about the process and what we've done here. I think we've learned a lot over the past 7 to 10 years that we've been doing this. If we were starting today with the 2060 general plan, I would do it completely differently than we did it this time. We started talking about the need for an updated general plan when Rob Mandiola was the planning director. And then we had Michael Bethke starting to get the ducks in order. And then Art Enriques was on. While Art was here, we hired Diet and Baccia as our general plan consultant. They started the process going. Then they declined to continue the process, and we hired Mintier Harnish to do be the general plan consultant. Then we moved from Art Enriques to Kathy Woodbury as the planning director, holding down the fort until we got to Gary Armstrong. And then Gary was here for a couple of years directing how the general plan was being done. And then the board chose not to continue with Mintier Harnish, and then we got the EMC. And then I was overseeing the planning department. Now we have Joe Horwoodle as the Resource Management Agency Director, which oversees planning, public works, and integrated waste. And the county is currently recruiting to fill that position. So during this time, we've also had massive policy shifts from the board where we've gotten rid of PERGI and we've gotten rid of growth management ordinance, and we've changed and adopted a TDC program that doesn't really have any teeth in it. We've gotten rid of the required inclusionary housing. We've massively tweaked the hillside ordinance due to policy changes on the board level. And then we've also had a massive economic shifts. So as far as the Planning Commission not being involved in the process, it's been tough getting from point A to point B. And if we were starting over today, we'd be starting at the Planning Commission. We'd be utilizing the GPAC a little differently than we did before. We've got members of the GPAC in the audience today. We would utilize their direction more than we did. We'd utilize the Planning Commission more than we did. And so that's all I wanted to say about the process and how we got here. As far as the recommendation goes, if County Council has some concise language that we can read into the record as far as the staff recommendation is, we can hear it.
So I have written out some recommended language for a motion if the commission is inclined to adopt the resolution that would essentially certify the final EIR, or the EIR, make all the CEQA findings, and recommend adopting the general plan update. If that's the way the commission is inclined to go, I do have some recommended language. However, there were a couple of things that have been directed to be tweaked in the general plan itself. And so we need time to prepare revisions to the errata. And I'm not talking about like another day. I'm talking about let's take a 15 or so, whatever, minute break so we can write those up and print them out and have them in front of you before you take your action, so that it's clear on the record what you would be recommending to the board. And so I guess, if you're inclined to do something else, then we don't need to do that right now. But if you are inclined to move it forward, we need to take a break.
Well, let's take a break so we can get everything in writing and so we can see what we're going to approve.
Sure.
Okay. So we'll take a 15-minute break. Okay. Back at 8:36. 7:36.
No, you're right the first time.
Hey, Byron.
safety issues that someone didn't put in. You got breakers, you got. I know. There's something that it has to break before it goes through. If it's done right, I didn't want to say that. They said the wires knocked it. Well, they have to have like some kind of safety mechanism. It shuts it off. Well, which means that having a breaker. You get a power switch. John likes to argue a lot about things. I think that just like one of the swimming pool, they have a safety. If it gets too cold, you get comfy and you water really freeze. Yeah. I think that maybe the guys did it solo themselves and forgot to put some kind of safety mechanism. Because I know electrical, and you have to have. I mean, I'm no electrician, but I know that you have to have a breaking point somewhere. Even cars, some cars will break a fuse bullet. You get power just out, it burn that fuse bullet. Yeah, some of the cars. It's crazy how much wiring they have. All of them. Everything. I mean, I hate all these computers. The car I want to do is I like it. The car with the Tesla. I think it's nice. Oh, there's working systems. It's really amazing. We started 60 and go up to 140. So we're going to bring a lower version of it. The Tesla. Yeah, I've been to the plant. It's beautiful. They built everything here. The only thing California didn't allow them to build the battery plant. So they went to Reno. Stupid, because that place employs so many employees. Because they take care of everything and they make their own motors, they make everything. And the one I like was 140,000. 7 people. Big old, looked like a big old Mercedes. Yeah. Well, the first I was 20,000. Yeah, but there are this my mechanic that he just worked for me. He worked for Tesla, and we got in there on the recycling aspect of it. And first he tried to introduce recycling to Tesla. The guy from the engineer goes, "We build cars here. We don't care about the recycling." Well, then another engineer came on there. Last year when I went over there, the first 9 months, they had produced $12 million of recyclable material. Because they were just paying. There was a company going there, there was a company giving peanuts. So now they got smart, so they have another. They built a massive recycling facility for all their cardboard, all their aluminum, and they got an anti-current, so it takes out the different metals out of it. So they're doing it really. 12 million. And I'm trying to get in there because they have those tires that they have on there, and they go through tons of them. If the wheel has a blemish, say it's like they don't want it to take it out, they have to crush that rim and cut the tire. Yeah, so I go on mechanical. Let me try to get in there and I'll get a rim crusher. At the same time, it'll crush the tire, it'll cut it. But they want the rim because it's aluminum, and they cut Well, yeah, yeah. No, they'll charge you for it. But you get an account like that, you can bail all the tires, and you can sell them overseas. Chinese will bail. I couldn't say I wouldn't know. It's really expensive. I know just for us, if we were to ship our cardboard on overseas containers, it costs like $500 to go from here to Oakland. Yes. drink. The resort is, but it was pricey. $75 for buffet dinner per person. But the one, you know, that was my budget. I had $200 to pay for food. $160. From $140 to $160 for the breakfast. Buffet. Beer $10. Drinks 13. We spend quite a bit because we're four of us, and my son and my daughter like to eat quite a bit. We go buy a hot dog or a hamburger with it by the 4-ish place. It is very expensive at times. I told her, let's go downtown, because I talked to the maids. I go, oh, you can go down there. Because we you know, watching the show the other day, North Dakota, or, you know, is it South Dakota where they got all the oil fields? People going over there. How, they have the trouble they went into, I mean, some can't get a job. Some church take them in. The, minister's taking a bunch of people. Yeah. Well, we have it here. We got a couple of dispensaries in town. Oh, yeah. You know how much money those people make? You know how much money those people make? I know this guy, you remember American Metals there in San Jose? There's a guy named Howard, they used to own the City Metals, I mean, the American Metals Soldier Smith. He has a building down Southern California. He still likes to do recycling, and half of it, he's got the greenhouse, all controlled temperature. He's got the lights, they're on cables, so the plant grows, they raise the lights. 12 hours lights on, 12 hours pitch black. And the only way you go in there is the green light. You won't wake up the plant. The plant, that's why the plants get so big. They want them short and they're real strong. With the PCP, is it on? PhD, it's very potent. Yeah, yep. And in Salinas has a plant there that's making candy and making all kinds of stuff with marijuana. Yeah. Yep. But they can't sell it in the city of Salinas. They can sell it to other states where it's legal. Oregon. No, no one. Look at his knees. Everybody complains about everything. Ready? Okay, continue with the meeting.
It's interesting, it's super.
What's commission, the board want to do with this? Oops.
Are we
Ready?
back?
Yeah, we're back.
I'm prepared to make a motion, Mr. Chairman. Before I do, just by way of housekeeping, was there an errata sheet or something? Or is this it?
So let me just describe it. So essentially, based on the direction we heard from the planning commission, is that you wanted some changes to commercial node policy to eliminate the commercial node at 156 and 101. Is it not on? Thank you. Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Michael Gross for the record. What we understood before we went out to break is that the commission wanted to make some shifts to the commercial node, regional commercial node policy, which is policy 5.3. That's the policy that actually implements the regional commercial nodes. And the request was to eliminate the commercial node at 156 and 101. There was a request to also require design review for these commercial nodes so that they have to come through some kind of design review process and then potentially contribute to the preservation of scenic areas along these corridors to achieve the county's scenic policy goals. And then there was also some indication about possibly another intersection that you wanted to make sure was in, which had to do with this livestock intersection, and so we'll talk about that. What we did on the break was craft a new policy 5.3, and it's in your general plan on page 321, and it's new commercial regional nodes. And so this scratch you have on here, essentially you have the page on the second page. You actually have that page of the general plan. And you can see there's one star or one asterisk, and in that star it'll say, the sentence will read now, the county shall encourage new commercial regional nodes to be located at or near existing or future highway interchanges, major intersections, and along existing or future transit facilities. And we're adding to that, consistent with figure 3-5, which is the actual map that's attached. It's the third page that you have. Consistent with figure 3-5, excluding the intersection, in parentheses, excluding the intersection of US Highway 101 and State Route 156, which was your desire to eliminate that as a potential commercial. The second change was the double asterisk or the double stars. And what we added there, and it goes right after that sentence I just read, in order to respect the scenic character of the county, new development at these commercial nodes shall be subject to design review before the County Planning Commission. Further development within these commercial nodes is encouraged to contribute to preservation of scenic areas along the designated scenic corridors within the county. So that would be the addition to the policy. So the only question I have remaining is, do we have all the nodes correct that you do want in?
You spoke to the nodes, Dan.
Yeah, I think they do.
Are these correct?
I think, yes.
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Commissioner, then the nodes that we have in are there's 4, and we would be eliminating one of those nodes. Is that correct in what you
Yeah,
wanted?
I'm
Okay.
from the north and going south, Bedabel, 129, that livestock 101 property, which already is commercial zone. I don't know what the zoning is on Bedabel 129. And then,
San Juan.
yeah, San Juan Road / Red Barn.
And so did you want that existing commercial to be a node? Did you guys decide on
Yes.
that? I didn't.
Oh.
No.
Well, yes, I think since
should be.
it's already zone commercial.
Okay. So we'll add that
It's
in.
existing, it's existing.
Okay. So I have on the,
Hold on, Michael. Byron, you got a look going on, Byron. What's going on?
We wanted to make sure we didn't undo
Got it. So you're doing it to make it conforming. So if you look at the scribbly scratch that is the page on the front, the last item on there says, on the map, figure 3-5, add additional node at existing commercial development north of Cole Road on US 101. And we probably want to say to make it consistent with the existing development or consistent with the existing zoning.
Okay. To make consistent with, okay.
Is that that's the current general plan designation? Or just zoning?
I think just current zoning.
Yeah, I think it's just the zoning is commercial at this point, not the general plan, so.
And this will not trigger a new EIR?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
I move that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2015-04, recommending that the Board of Supervisors certify the 2035 General Plan EIR, which consists of the RD EIR and the final EIR, adopt the CEQA findings, mitigation measures, and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and statement of overriding considerations. I further move that we adopt the 2035 General Plan, which includes the May 6, 2014 General Plan Public Review Draft and the errata as modified. The modifications to consist of that which has been read and provided to us on the record by the EMC consultant, Michael Groves. I don't need to reread everything he just said, right? Okay. So that's my motion.
Second it?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, that's 4-1.
Great.
Okay, so,
Move to adjourn.
Second it?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.